Welcome to the podcast that puts a finger on the pulse of medicine and technology. On this show, you'll hear from investors, industry executives, and healthcare providers on the science and business of medicine. I'm your host, Omar Khateeb, and this is the State of MedTech. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. So this episode is one that is eligible to unlock a CME credit. So if you're a clinician listening to this episode, you want to get a free AMA PRA Category 1 CME credit. That's right, free, because the State of MedTech has decided to support clinicians by making all our CMEs free. Go ahead and check the notes below, click the link, and go and make a quick 30-second reflection on what you learned, and you'll unlock your CME credit. And if you're a MedTech company and you're curious about how you can work with me to add, let's say, a CME to your demos, to some of your blogs, your dinners, your in-person events, go ahead and shoot me a message on LinkedIn or hit me up through email at omar@khateebandco.com. Now, for today's guest, really interesting one, Dr. Daniel Paull, who's an orthopedic surgeon out of Colorado. Paull spelled with 2 L's. And here's the interesting thing about him. He has no office, and he does not take any insurance. How's that possible? Well, Dr. Paull made that possible because once he graduated fellowship, he looked at his options for practicing medicine. He didn't like any of them. So he went ahead and created and carved out his own category, his own niche, which is essentially mobile orthopedic care. Now, if you go to his website called easyorthopedics.com, and orthopedic spelled the American way, PEDIC, this is what he says. The modern medical system makes it difficult for the doctor to spend any real time with the patient. As the patient, you feel that no one is listening to you, and as a doctor, it's hard to do a good job in a 7-minute visit, which creates a recipe for misdiagnosis and treatments that won't work. I created Easy Orthopedics so I can spend more time with my patients and my patients can spend more time with me without all the burdens of the modern healthcare system. That way you can tell your story, I can arrive at the correct diagnosis, and together we can find a treatment plan that fits you. I love this because it's a very radical way of approaching healthcare. And sometimes when it comes to changing things, you can't necessarily disrupt them because disrupting them means that you're going to work with what you have. He's completely moved out of the healthcare system and created something on his own. So this episode dives into that, including how he started and what made him get into this decision. So enjoy this episode. And again, to get that CME credit, go ahead and click the link below. And now here's my episode with Dr. Daniel Paull. All right, and we're on. Hey, everybody. This is Omar Khateeb, your head of state for the State of MedTech. I'm joined by Dr. Daniel Paull. Dr. Paull and I, we met about a year ago. I noticed his posts and articles on LinkedIn because he, instead of graduating fellowship in orthopedic residency and going to either work for a large practice or a hospital, he decided to not only open his own private practice, but a mobile orthopedic practice, which I've never heard of. And it's been well over a year now. And so I wanted to have him back. He has extremely provocative content on LinkedIn because he says pretty much what everybody else is thinking, but usually just don't have the cojones to say it, but he does it. And so a lot of his content is focused around the, really unfair environment with health insurance and private practice. And so I wanted to have him on to talk about some of these, topics. Dr. Paull, thanks for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Martha. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, because the universe knew that I was interviewing you today, so you're in Colorado, I'm in SoCal, it's like 40 degrees outside. It's freezing out here for us. I don't know what's going on. So I know that's like summertime for you guys, but still it's pretty cold for us.
Yeah, man, this last summer was hot, though. I don't have AC, so this next summer I'm getting it. We've got a new house, so I can't live like that again.
Oh, man, yeah. No, definitely not. Definitely not. So, Dr. Paull, before we kind of dive into it, there's some really interesting topics that, I know that have been on your mind. Just for the audience that's new to you, can you give us a quick 1-2 minute high level of, where you're from, where you trained, and just kind of, your story?
Gotcha. Yeah. So, man, my story really has 2 origins to it. I'll try to make it quick. So I come from a family of engineers, and then I had a bad skiing accident when I was 14. I broke a lot of bones, both legs, my right arm, and I got all patched up and fixed up, and I was like, wow, orthopedics is really amazing. Like, this is pretty cool. They put me back together. I'm running track in high school and basically allowed to have a normal life. So that was my moment where I decided that I wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon. Not necessarily a doctor, but, I just wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon. So kind of went orthopedics or bust. I went to college at NYU, went to medical school at University of Miami, and then I got into residency at University of Toledo with Dr. Nabil Ibrahim, who's pretty well known in the trauma world of orthopedics, at least, and on YouTube. So everything was going to how I thought it was supposed to be going. And then I started a fellowship in hand surgery. And the reason why I did that is that most orthopedic surgeons at residency do that because you want to subspecialize, and it's an extra year of training. It really is so you can work in a competitive market. And there's also surgeries you don't really want to do. Like I didn't really want to do joints, so I didn't want to do general. So I started that, and then something kind of strange happened or unexpected kind of halfway through. One is I was really unhappy. And I'm looking for a job out in Colorado Springs. That's where my wife's from. And I dragged her all over the country. And I said, hey, this is where, I want to come back here. And the jobs were terrible. They were like, take our entire level 3 call for our whole practice, like the whole time. Or here's your 4-month guarantee. Now, standard guarantee is 2 years. So here's your 4-month guarantee. And there's no existing pool of patients. So you need to build it on your own. So jobs were terrible. So I interviewed out in Connecticut, where I'm from. And there was just this old bitter senior partner telling me how much money he made in the early 90s. And then I talked to a junior attending there, and I said, are you happy here? And he was like, well, it's getting better. I mean, this guy's about to cry. And it's like, it's getting better. It's like you live your whole life, it's getting better. Like, what are you doing? And then it was like, well, what am I doing? And, the fellowship was not what, there's a whole story behind that. But, that wasn't what I wanted it to be. And I can't find a job, and there was this kind of existential and personal crisis, and then I just said, screw it. So I had a friend in South Florida who started a house call practice for cash, doing internal medicine sort of stuff. And I'm like, he's happier than anybody I know, and he's making more money than anybody I know. I'm like, there's something here. I don't know what it is, but there's something. So I basically quit my fellowship. Now, to put this in context, I've already gone through 4 years of med school and 5 years of residency. It's a 1-year fellowship. 5 months in and I quit. Not an easy decision, not something I thought I would do. So I had to break my lease, and then I moved out into my in-laws' basement. And so, my colleagues are graduating, getting jobs like $300,000-$400,000. And I'm in the basement with 2 sticks, just rubbing them together, trying to figure it out. I mean, and the basic premise is that it's a no insurance model. And the reason why I do that is because if I take insurance, I need to hire 5 people full-time to collect from insurance. Now, over time, that overhead goes up and the reimbursements go down, and it becomes absolutely unsustainable. So what's more than that is you can't really practice the type of medicine I wanted to practice. You're practicing transactional-based medicine, meaning you have 15 minutes for an appointment, half of that's documentation, you're seeing as many people as you can. God forbid someone has 2 problems or 3 problems, you can't really adequately take care of them. There's no time for patient education. That's the model that I was trained in, and that essentially everybody does. But by removing insurance, I can actually practice how really I think physicians are meant to practice, which is relationship-based. So I book people 45 minutes, an hour, and I get to really spend time with them. Now, the only way that's possible is if you don't take insurance. So instead of looking at, well, how do I get my volume as high as possible and then hiring an army of people, I look at how do I get my overhead as low as possible. And I flipped it on its head. So that's why I started off mobile. So right now my overhead, when I started, I think when I was really bootstrapping, it was about $800 a month, including malpractice. Now it's about $2,000 a month, which is, half the cost of an MA per year to run my entire practice, including my, including my malpractice. There's ways to do it. And then I started off doing house calls and then found that other doctors wanted me to see patients at their office. So mobile kind of took on a different term. So I see people in other people's offices, or I'll see them in an imaging center. So I'm doing less house calls, even though I'm still mobile. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. And the more I got into it, the more I realized, this system that we're in, that I kind of got just defected from on accident, I don't know how you want to say it. I ended up outside the system. Is really, really terrible. So it kind of gives me a better view of it. Paradoxically, my practice is more stable than, the other orthopedic surgeons around me, which is kind of crazy to think about. But I don't know. That's kind of it in a nutshell of how it started and kind of why I'm doing it.
Yeah, and what I think is interesting is that, um, you know, I think you actually said it last time we talked, which is, and I'm in the similar position you were when you left a fellowship, which is like you started your business out of like a need, not because like, oh, things are great. It's like, hey, what the hell? Let me just start a business. That's usually not how it happens. And what's interesting was that, you really paid attention to your intuition, which was screaming at that point that like none of this makes sense and you're just going to be miserable. And so it took a lot of bravery and courage to do what you're doing. I want to shift gears just a little bit, so again, I love the things that you write on LinkedIn. They're very clear in their thinking. And what's very interesting is that, yeah, they resonate. I'm in marketing. You don't use any hashtags, nothing. And so these aren't positioned to be optimized for reach, and they have incredible engagement on them. And so one of them that you posted a week ago, this has been like one of your most engaged posts, like hundreds of people have been engaged with it. There's a lot of comments. I'm going to read it, and I just kind of want to, have you kind of dive deeper on this, which is, so you wrote, health insurance companies like to play a funny game with physicians. They will never tell you what to do or not to do with a patient. They'll just decide if they want to pay for it or not. They argue that they are not obstructing care because they aren't saying that the patient can't do it, just that they won't pay for it. I would argue that they are in effect denying care by deciding not to pay for it and should face medical liability for said decisions. It is highly inappropriate for anyone for anyone several states away to deny care based off a medical record that was created for billing and is oftentimes minimally descriptive. They have never seen the patient nor spoken to them in almost every case, yet they deny the care that the doctor says is necessary. The whole irony of the situation is that sometimes if insurance does want to pay for something, let's say an MRI, the patient ends up paying more towards their deductible than they would have paid in cash upfront. This whole industry needs disruption. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so I mean, when you're in the system, this all seems kind of normal and certainly frustrating. So if I were to see you and we thought you needed an MRI of your knee, I mean, and I didn't send you to PT or, do injections or all this other junk, like insurance will not pay for it. I have to check the boxes. So when I send my note into the insurance company, they need to audit it, make sure I've done what they think is appropriate, and then you can get your MRI. But what if but medicine's not like that. What if you tore your ACL or something like that, and that's other stuff's not going to help you? Do I have to appeal to the insurance company to tell them, hey, he really needs it? Or why can't they just trust my judgment? What they say is that, one, well, we're not actually denying the care. So this kind of removes them of legal liability. We're just refusing to pay for it. But this isn't a person who's paying premiums between them and their company, which is a whole other issue because those premiums go up every year and people don't get raises because all the money's going to healthcare. And they're basically having a physician who is an expert in their field, should be, right? Saying the expert in the field says that I need an MRI on my knee. And they're saying, well, no, you don't. And that's just not appropriate. And they're saying, well, we're cost containing. We just don't want to approve MRIs for everybody. But they end up approving over 90% of what is ordered anyways. It's just a game of attrition. So maybe 1 out of every 10 physicians doesn't have the time to get around to fighting with them. And by the way, when you fight with them, you have to call them. You do a peer-to-peer. You go through, you've called insurance companies before. It sucks. You got to go through multiple people and phone trees.
Let me ask you a question that's going to piss off everybody. Every doctor's going to be like, yep. How many times when you do that peer-to-peer do you talk to another orthopedic surgeon?
And, you eventually you can. I mean, if it keeps getting escalated, but not all the time. I've talked to cardiologists and stuff. We're talking about ankle syndesmosis disruption. He goes, I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm just going to approve this CT scan. He knows a lot about the heart, but what does he know about ankle syndesmosis? Not a lot. And then, if they really want to fight you, you eventually can talk to an orthopedic surgeon or whoever. But the point is you've already spent an hour now in frustration. And physicians are busy. I mean, these are volume-based practices. So it really drags them into the mud. This is an unpaid hour, by the way, too. And you can't hand it off. You need to be peer-to-peer. They're basically trying to dominate your time for the purposes of attrition. Like I said, they approve 90% of this stuff anyways. But again, if a company and an employee are paying insurance premiums on time, correctly, and they see an expert in the field of healthcare, a physician who orders what they believe to be a necessary test, they should just approve it. That is the deal. And by not approving it, I mean, what if there's a problem? What if it's cancer or there's some problem and like it delays everything? So they're inserting themselves in the doctor-patient relationship and making medical decisions, even though they say they're not doing that. They are. By not paying for it, there's a lot of times people can't get it done. They're denying the care. I don't care what they say. I don't care if they have an orthopedic surgeon on staff. You know what? Because they didn't see the patient. I mean, you can do telehealth, but they're not even doing that. They're just going off notes. And these notes are created for billing with medical legal COA, number 2, and somewhere at the bottom, like patient notes, you know? So like, how can you even go off those records? Like I've seen attendings when I was in residency write perfect notes for insurance purposes, but they're totally, you can't tell what the hell's going on with the patient because there's no actual text.
There's no context. You're just like, yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, it's detective work. So like, there's no way somebody, and I'm working with the attending, so I know what's going on, at least when I was a resident. So how does an insurance company do that? And a lot of times these denials aren't based on physicians. The person may be only high school educated or like, you know, a nurse or something who I don't believe has the expertise to make these decisions.
Yeah.
So it's just insane.
Yeah. And you know, what's interesting is that, you know, when they changed the hours for training from residency from, I guess, like you can't go over, what is it, over 90 or 120 hours a week? One of the two?
80 hours averaged. So you can do a 100-hour week, but then you got to have like a 60-hour week in a month.
Got it. So, you know, they thought that a lot of medical error was occurring because, you know, people get tired and they're sleeping and everything. When in fact, when people looked at the data, and I remember this when I was in medical school, a nephrologist actually pointed this out. The errors weren't happening there. The errors were happening when the handoffs were occurring. So I would wonder if, I don't know if somebody did a retrospective study on this, how much error occurs because when you look at the notes for a patient, like you don't know what the hell you're reading because it's built for billing, not for communicating effectively with other physicians.
Right. You know, it depends on like, so in our residency and a lot of other residencies, they have a list. So like a very meticulously updated list. So the actual important patient information should be hand off well. But if you just have notes you're going on, like, oh, you can't tell heads from tails. So I don't know. That could be it. Because if a provider doesn't want to document what they did by writing essentially a paragraph of text, like you have no idea what's going on. If you didn't talk to him, I mean, the note may be perfect for billing, so it doesn't get, you know, for the hospital, that's perfect. But for actual medicine, it's not. I mean, notes were initially, a doctor would just keep them in his own office and refer to them before the patient came in to be like, oh yeah, this is what's going on with so-and-so. You know, and then they kind of were co-opted and now they're audited and it's just become a total disaster. It's moved very far away from note-taking, really.
Yeah, and you know, so something that you mentioned at the bottom of the post, and this is something where, again, like you just spent the last like 10 years in medical school and training and everything, and so this world of like startups and business is very different. This is very nuanced, but I wanted to point something out, which was you mentioned that the whole industry needs disruption, and I disagree. And the reason why I disagree is that disruption a lot of times has to do with making something different and better within the given market. And what you're doing with Easy Orthopedics and doing mobile orthopedic care is that you're not technically disrupting. You're doing something completely different and new, which by comparison, like there is no comparison. You know, when you disrupt, then there's something to compare to because it's like, oh, this is better than the standard. But what you're doing is something completely different and new. Like you cannot compare the two things. And it forces a choice, which is either I'm going to go with the insurance company or go this one route, or I'm going to go cash based. Like there, you can't really compare the two. A byproduct of that is comparison. But it's like when you go to the gas station, and I think when 4-hour energy drink was invented, an energy shot and an energy drink are two completely different things. It really forces you to make a choice, which is, do I want to drink this whole liter of liquid, or do I want to take a little shot? Do you think that what you're doing, as more people find out about it, like have there been other surgeons who reached out because they want to try what you're doing? Have you? You know, what's been the response from the medical community?
I think that yeah, there have been other surgeons that reached out. They want to know what I'm doing because they're at the end of their rope, and they
Are they
don't
usually
they
younger, early on in their career, like you, or like
both?
what's both?
I've had people only a year in practice, and I've had people who are practicing for like a couple decades. I think they kind of now it's usually the same story. They like the practice of medicine. They like their patients. They do not like the business model of delivery that they're forced into by playing these insurance and hospital games. And then usually these people are very autonomous type people, and they find that it's becoming more and more difficult to maintain that as overhead goes up and reimbursements go down. And so they find themselves having to work for these large systems they don't like, and maybe there's hospital bullying, and they like medicine at its core. They don't like all the other stuff, and like it has to be pretty bad, and they reach kind of a point of desperation. That's usually when they'll contact me, and I'll do consulting. That's like another arm of my business. I'll do consulting for these physicians. I used to do it for free, but then I got worn out by some Bay Area tech guy just like beating me down with questions, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. At least not for free.
Yeah, no, definitely. Never do it for free.
Yeah.
Always charge.
Right. Well, plus it shows that they're serious. They really want to know. Not like, oh, that's cool. Like, I'm not doing it for the, oh, that's cool. Like, you really, if I'm spending my time with you and it's a one-way conversation, I want you to take some actionable steps.
Oh my God. Yeah. I can't tell you, like, I try, like, I was just messaging somebody back right now, somebody on LinkedIn. So this is the thing, is that as you start creating more content, the nice things that you meet more people, it grows your brand, but then more people come asking you for stuff. And I try my best to help people. My biggest thing, and again, for the young, like, reps listening, if you reach out for advice, the very least you can do is take action on it. That's the very, very least. And then for the people who are in tech, if you reach out to a physician like Dr. Paull, like you're trying to get some help on things, if it's one or two phone calls, that's one thing. After that, you gotta offer to pay them something. Otherwise, you're just looking like an asshole. Just this is just my opinion. I don't know why. Like people think like it's like, oh yeah, like they're making enough money. It's like no, time is not renewable, and so you should be compensated for it. Do you feel that what do you think what do you think it would take to see more cash-based, let's say more mobile medical practice like yours? Like, can they survive, let's say, in a large city like Houston, for example, or Los Angeles?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Before I answer that, I want to talk about the disruption. So I agree with you in what you're saying.
Yeah, go please.
I mean, we're on the same page here. I mean, my premise is that the system is so bad. There's so much lobbying money in it. You just can't attack it from that angle. So, like, you can't fix it. So you have to create a new system with different value propositions. And, like, that's why I existed. And not just me, other people too. Direct primary care doctors are really the pioneers here. But the idea is as that system grows, it will start to affect the older system. So I guess when I say disruption, I mean as it grows, it becomes a threat to this other system. And that's where I think the disruption is. I'm not really trying to improve the other system. I guess I'm essentially trying to just replace it.
And I love that. Like you're just taking shots at it, which I think that's what it takes.
But shots, they can't fight on their own terms, right? Like,
well, and then what are they going to do? They're not. What are they going to do to you? That's the exactly. That's the part that I love. Like every week that I wake up, I'm like, what's Daniel Paull posted today? Because I love it. It's like no holds barred, zero F's given. And it's I know that so many, for a fact, so many surgeons read this as like, hell yeah. Like, that's exactly how I feel.
But they're stuck. They don't want to lose insurance contracts. They don't want to bother their hospital. They're worried about this or that. I don't have any of those things. I have nothing to lose. I mean,
what's the craziest thing? Like, we're going to take a quick commercial break. Now, if you're in medical sales, you're going to want to listen to us, whether you're a capital sales rep, an associate sales rep, maybe you're a VP leading a sales team, or perhaps you're the CEO and founder of a company and you're doing your first sales hire. Let's face it, medical sales has changed quite a lot from just the past few years. But let me tell you how much it's changed and, more importantly, how bad it's gotten. There's a company called Access Monitor that did a survey of over 347,000 physicians over the period of about 8 or 9 years, right? And they started in 2008, and they wanted to see what percentage of physicians were accessible to reps. And the way they defined that is if a physician took 70% of the calls that a rep made, they were considered accessible. So if a physician gets 100 calls from different reps throughout the year, they take 70 of them, that's considered accessible. So in 2008, that number was 80%. And then in less than a decade, that number every year dropped little by little. And then over time, the compounding effects of that had a huge impact. Because in 2016, that number dropped all the way down to 44%. Now, right now, we're in 2022 and we're about to start 2023. So fast forward 6-7 years, how much more lower is that number? And based on the variable of the 2020 lockdown, how much lower do you think it could have gotten? Now, based on my analysis and modeling of that, that number is less than 3% at this point. Think about that. Your sales team, every time they go outbound, they have a 3% chance of getting in touch with somebody because only 3% of physicians are actually accessible to reps, right? So how do you differentiate? How do you actually put yourself to be in a position to be successful? Well, the good news is that you're listening to this commercial. And the best part is that the majority of companies out there, and when I say majority, I mean 99% of them because I've audited so many of them, have not invested a penny into updating their sales training or having their sales reps know how do you actually sell and persuade somebody who you can't see in person, right? And I had this issue back in 2020, and let me tell you about the new way, the different way, right? And that is digital medical sales. You see, back in 2020, I was part of a small startup. We sold capital equipment to critical care departments. And I was able to use a digital medical sales strategy to put 35 deals in 60 days. During 2020, during the lockdown, that's right, 35 deals. And those deals ranged from deals like Johns Hopkins, UCSF, University of Kansas, to HCA facilities, small regional hospitals, right? The idea is, how do you use digital channels such as LinkedIn, email, virtual demos to persuade at scale and drive technology adoption? And the best part is that you can do this as a team where the effects of it are even larger. And so I put together a program and a community to train and develop the sales team of the future called the Medical Sales Network Effects Program. Why network effects? Because the most powerful companies in the world, from Google to Facebook, Uber, and so on, have used the idea of a network effect, meaning that the larger a network gets, the more valuable it is, the more leveraged it is. And your sales team can use these same kind of principles in their outreach digitally so that they can sell at scale without stepping into a hospital. Let me tell you a little bit about the program and how it breaks down. The program is divided into 3 different areas. It's all centered around content, which is constantly evolving, being updated through our portal. Reps have access to this both on computer and on their mobile phone so they can learn on the go. And we have events and a community around that. So the content is very simple. With the content, we take first principle foundational topics such as psychology, persuasion, network effects, and more, and help the rep apply it across a variety of different areas. Not only just their LinkedIn profile, but their emails, their presentations, their outreach. So that way, even when your rep has to go in person, they're a lot more effective because they know the principles of psychology and persuasion and they're able to apply it. But then they can do that at scale using the same program. We have fantastic events every single week and every month. So every week we have these live calls where we cover a variety of topics, from how do you do a virtual demo to how do you shoot a video sales letter to how do you get emails opened. Did you ever think about that? Even before before the lockdowns happened, we use email. How much email training have you gotten? Probably not much, right? So your reps could be sending all kinds of emails that marketing spent time to develop, and it's probably going to the spam inbox because they don't have it formatted a certain way, right? Or they didn't write the right subject line so that it actually gets attention, gets opened. Along with our events, we have this great thing called the Network Grand Rounds. These are essentially private Zoom calls with special guest speakers because, let's face it, I, as talented as I am, I don't know everything. There's a lot of things I don't know. So I bring on the best in the industry to give these private Zoom calls. And so everybody gets on, the speaker gives a topic, and then they can ask questions. And if they can't attend live, they can always submit questions ahead of time and then watch the recording. And we've covered topics such as customer success, territory management, capital sales process. Let me give you some examples of those talks we've had. We've had Dr. Ira Kirschbaum, the chair of orthopedic surgery at Bronx Care, the largest nonprofit in the country, give a talk on how to get technology into a hospital. Where else are you going to hear the chair of a department explain how to get capital equipment in? We have Dr. Sandra White, who teaches the business of medicine to private practice owners, explaining how a rep can be a partner and a contributor to a private practice. We also have reps and successful sales leaders give talks. So, for example, Jacob McLaughlin, when over at Medtronic, was given a poor performing territory, turned it around in 1 year to a multi-million-dollar success story. He provides his framework for that. And of course, our community. We have a growing community online. We have this private LinkedIn group where we use it for people to connect with each other and also to share content and reports. And we have a lot of great people in that group. We have influencers such as the Mad Device Rep, executive recruiter Mike Moore, other people such as former VPs like Jim Surik. But we also have a lot of sales reps, a lot of young associates who are in there who know how to commercialize and sell digitally, who you can hire onto your team, right? And also, there's plenty of people for you to learn from as well. We have some of the world's top and largest MedTech companies are in our program right now, people from Stryker and Medtronic and Johnson & Johnson, but also a lot of startups like Hyperfine, Potrero Medical, Intercosmos, Moon Surgical, and the list goes on. And of course, we have a growing list of members getting huge results. I mean, if you're watching this on YouTube or on Spotify, you can see all these results. You know, anywhere from people getting reached out to online from surgeons to going to conferences and being recognized. So, for example, Guida Lovera, she's in the spine world. She mentioned how surgeons directly message her online to learn about her products, and she's actually recognized when she goes to conference. Franco Datillo, who at the time joined the program when he was in between jobs, was in a real tough spot, and wrote this beautiful testimony on how the program helped him land a new role and increase his income. And believe it or not, we actually have practicing surgeons in our program. That's right. There's actual surgeons. So like Dr. Michael Verdon, he's a practicing spine surgeon, joined the program because surgeons are wanting to learn how to utilize and leverage things like LinkedIn to control a narrative online. And he mentions how his network has exploded, right? And for this podcast, since you're listening to this, I have a free offer for you. You can get a free LinkedIn profile consult from me and my team and see if you qualify for the program. Plus, we also have team packages. So go ahead and click the link in the show notes below. Book your free consult. The best part is that you're going to walk away with at least 3 ideas on how to improve your LinkedIn presence so you can sell more and more effectively. So go ahead and take advantage of this offer. And now let's get back to the show. Easiest thing, like me being the son, like, so my dad's a general surgeon. So of all the physicians, I'm very close to and understand like the surgeon world, right? And surgeons by nature, really aggressive, entrepreneurial, extremely capitalistic, competitive, and
narcissistic.
Yeah, that comes along with it. But you know what? I will argue this is that while that is true, if I go to a surgeon, I do want them to have a little bit of a God complex. I don't want them second guessing themselves in surgery, but it needs to be tailored a bit. I agree with you on that.
I mean, as a surgeon, you just need to be confident, right? Like, I don't take cases on. I don't think I'm going to do a good job. If I've decided to take your case on surgically, I know I can do a good job, and I express that to the patient. Otherwise, I wouldn't do it. You know, and there's always this idea that, like, well, this guy's really nice. He must not be a good surgeon. Or like, oh, this guy's a total asshole. He must be the best. And like, I'm telling you, that's not a real thing. I've seen really nice surgeons who are excellent, really, really good. And I've seen assholes who are not. So don't go by that. Plus, if you get the guy that just wants to operate all day and night, which most surgeons do, and like, you know, I like being in the operating room as well. Sometimes when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Sometimes their indications can start to loosen and they'll start doing unnecessary surgeries. Yeah. And I've certainly seen that. I could tell you stories about things that would probably bother you.
Well, yeah, no, I can imagine. You know, and for some reason, being from Texas and again, being in the medical world, I never knew about this, Dr. Death out of Dallas. Have you heard of this guy? Yeah, so I don't,
Oh, yeah.
Don't ruin it for me. I'm gonna listen to the podcast and check out the documentary. But you know, this bad behavior happens as a result, not with Dr. Death. Let's just say like
that's rare. That's an outlier.
That's rare, yeah. So like in Becker's, you see somebody like went to jail because they were taking advantage of the system and everything. And a lot of this behavior,
fraud.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of this happens because I think it's out of desperation. Like, you know, when I was growing up, not even growing, let's just say 10 years ago, the model was things change, and if your surgeon's like, you know what, I'm just gonna work hard or whatever, like I'll just like I haven't met a single physician who does not like clinical practice, especially surgeons. They love it. They love it. What they don't like, and this is where you see that, I don't know what that poll, that survey is now, it's like 48 or 49% of physicians said that they would not do it again if they had to. It's not because they don't like clinical practice, it's because they hate all the bullshit that comes along with it when it comes to insurance companies, dealing with the hospital system and everything. Look, I mean, my father, after 35 years of being in private practice, and some of his friends, they can't keep up like that, ended up going in-house and working for hospital system as employees. Miserable. Hated it.
Oh yeah,
hated it.
Just deal with the devil.
Yeah, because you're essentially being told what to do clinically by someone who has an MBA. No offense, there's a lot of great hospital administrators out there. There's a lot of them who are not that great, and it's not because of them. It's really because of the system, I think.
Well, their goals are different than physicians' goals, right? I think physicians, by nature, there's standards of care, right? But there's so many nuances to a patient visit that you really need to be given autonomy to make decisions, right? I mean, again, there's standards of care, so like you're in that realm. And I think when their goal is to make as much money as humanly possible, which is a lot of people's goal, right? I'm not hating on that specifically. It's not my goal. At least it's not primary. Maybe it's tertiary or quaternary. But so you run into trouble. They want to control their physicians, and the physicians don't want to be controlled. So you have all sorts of issues that come from that. And right, most physicians really do like the practice. They just hate what it actually looks like when the rubber meets the road. And what I'm saying is that doesn't have to be that way. And then that's not my model, and that's not what I do. I would be miserable there too. I mean, I can't. I'm unemployable.
That's spoken like a true entrepreneur.
Yeah, I'm unemployable. I just am. I can only work for myself.
One thing I worry about though is that because and again, it's changed. I don't know if it's changed for the better, but a lot of the reason why healthcare is where it is today, maybe not the main reasons, but a lot of it is, I think, physicians just saying they're just not interested in dealing with the business of medicine. They don't want to admit that it's a business. And then when you do that, that's when, politicians, business people, lawyers, they're the ones who end up making the shots. And then it's kind of the system that's created itself because a lot of responsibility has been abdicated. And I'm wondering, like, when I see physicians creating practices and everything, and then they decide to just immediately like sell the practice to the hospital, so I'm like, that like, what was the point?
If you don't do the business part of medicine, somebody else will for you. And it's not
that. What a great way to put it.
And it's not going to be, you're not going to like it. If you don't do it, like, to me, that's such a red flag statement. I mean, I've had somebody say it to me before, and it's like, have you listened to anything we've been talking about the past half hour? So like, those to me are parasites on the system, right? Do they add value? Yes, sometimes they do, but a lot of times they don't. They're just sucking.
But specifically, what do you mean say those are parasites, and specifically what and who?
I mean, people that insert themselves between, basically, this is really general, but anything between the doctor and the patient, so the patient pays money, somehow that money goes to the physician, right? Anything that sucks money out of there is a good rule of thumb to how you kind of track down a parasite in healthcare. Anything. Insurance companies, hospital administration, not necessarily. They're not necessarily malicious, right? Like, you have a lot of builders and coders
it's a thing, right?
That are very awesome people, but they are what it comes down to this, right? If they're not adding value to the doctor-patient relationship and they're siphoning money out, then to me that's a parasite on the system, right? So you can have a biller or coder who is an excellent human being and really good at what they do, and they provide tremendous value to physicians' practices who aren't coding appropriately. But at the end of the day, well, I guess they're adding money there. It becomes more blurry. But at the end of the day, they don't add anything to the doctor-patient relationship. And to me, that's just not necessary in the practice of medicine. I mean, if you have a standard practice, yes, those people are godsends to you. But I don't, and I would never need one. It just doesn't even matter. I'm not making CPT codes. They're not going anywhere. It's just removed. It doesn't exist. at least in the way I practice and other people who practice outside of the system.
Have you had to do like because part of this is patient education, right? How have you? I mean, look, you've gone this far for a reason. You didn't get lucky. Like, you've been putting a lot of work and learning. So how much does patient education play into it, and how do you go about doing that? Because most people who think about, like, oh, I'm going to pay cash for, like, orthopedics, like, that's crazy. Because usually you think about cash, primary care and other things are fine, but for surgery, it's in the whole other story. How have you solved that? How's your business kind of addressed that?
So the model is totally different. So it's a lower overhead, lower volume practice. So you don't need to see like 30, 40 people a day. I mean, actually, if you can get to the point where you can see 4 to 6 people a day, will be doing just as good, or if not better, than you were doing before, at least financially. I'm not quite at that point. It takes a long time to build. But how do you educate patients? So there's a lot of people that have been disserviced by the insurance industry, right? They're a small business owner. They don't have insurance, right? They're looking for you. They find you and you give them a transparent cash price that's reasonable, which they usually are. They're all over that, right? And then there's other people whose deductible is too high. They can't get an appointment with the orthopedic group in town because they're booking out 6 weeks because they're running a volume-based insane practice. You can get those people as well. You can get them in right away. It's hard to turn down at that. But yeah, you do get people who say, I have insurance, I want to use my insurance. And we tell them, yeah, you should, I'm just not the right fit for you. So, and also cash. We think of cash as somebody coming and paying with credit card or check or cash. Cash really means, in the context of, medical practice, not insurance, meaning you do not need to have tons of coding and billing and your EMR and sending it through insurance. So there's other avenues that you can generate income from that are cash-based, essentially not insurance-based. So for orthopedics, and it's different for every specialty, there's the world of personal injury, meaning that someone gets involved in a car accident, they have a lawyer, and there's a settlement that comes. You can see somebody and put a lien on that case so that if and when it settles, you'll get paid. And that's essentially cash, because if I order an MRI, nobody's auditing my notes and I can set my prices, You have to deal with lawyers, which for me is fine. But that's another source of cash, right? It's just not a source. I'm not dealing with insurance. I guess there's an auto insurance company, but guess what? Who's interfacing with them? The lawyer is. I'm not getting anywhere near that. So as long as you don't interface with an insurance company, it can function essentially as cash.
Got it. Yeah, and I think a lot of people are going to start being more interested in these kind of models. I mean, I'll speak for myself. So, I'm married. My wife and I are expecting a baby next year.
Congrats.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. So, this is the first time. So, again, for context, I'm a well-educated guy. I have a doctor. I have a dad who's a surgeon. I went to medical school. I work in the healthcare industry. But when I left my job and I was like, okay, I need to go get insurance, I was like, where do I go for that? How do I do this? Do I just go to the insurance company website? So I had to find a broker, and then, because we know we're having a baby next year, we're picking our plan. Outside of that, right? For me, we're both really healthy. I'm very much in favor of the idea of having insurance for something disastrous happening, like God forbid, a car, and then everything else I'll just pay out of pocket, because what's really frustrating is, again, the deductibles are one thing. I know that the No Surprise Billing Act came out, so people can't just surprise you with insane bills, but still you can go out of network. I'm in network, and I have really good insurance now that I'm paying for. I had really good insurance when I was in my last company. Sometimes when I have to go see a specialist, it takes 2 months, 3 months. I'm like, what the hell's the point of the insurance? I can't, and a lot of times you're just well, screw it. I have this little shoulder injury, and thankfully it's gotten better. I wanted to go to a specialist just to check it, but because of how long it's taking and everything with my own insurance, I was just screw it. So I went and, I went to a physical therapist and chiropractor, paid cash. I mean, thankfully it worked. It's better. But there's so many people that end up like that, where just screw it. I don't have time for this,
Yeah, and those are some of the people I see. I mean, it's a lot of irony with the insurance world, because if you pay cash, you may end up paying less than you would pay with a deductible. And you get much quicker, more transparent service. And usually it's better, because these people who are seeing you on cash are built for cash. So they're built for lower volume. So they end up spending more time with you. And they're not spending as much time dealing with literal nonsense like, prior authorizations and whatnot. So it's kind of, I don't have insurance personally. I don't use it. I use a health share. And we had a baby recently, and I ended up paying exactly $0 for this baby. And now,
What's health share?
So a health share, basically, they're not regulated like insurance. And they've been around for a while. And basically how it works is, for the one that I use, is I'm functionally uninsured to a hospital. And I say, I don't have any insurance. I need your cash price. I need negotiated cash price. They give me a cash price, and then I pay cash. And I submit that to a health share, and then if it's over the plan I use, if it's over $500, I get all that money back. But I have to do all the legwork up front, negotiate these cash prices, pay them. You can get a payment plan. And then eventually they'll send me a check a couple months later for the exact amount. So when all is said and done, I paid $0 for the baby, but then there was periods of time where I'm out $6,000 or, I'm on payment plans or whatnot. But I can go wherever I want. There's no networks. Now, you got to be careful with health shares. You have to make sure you use a legitimate one because, they're not regulated. But to me, it's actually strangely better than health insurance. I combine that with using a direct primary care doctor, and I think that's probably better than most insurance plans you can get. With direct primary care, if I want to go in I can get an appointment whenever I want. I pay a monthly amount. It's like a gym membership. And again, you're in the world of cash, so I think the care is a lot better. There's no nonsense.
With
but
the
I have to
monthly
figure all
primary
this stuff out too.
Yeah, and again, you're an MD and you went through training, but on the for the monthly primary care, I've seen models for that. Usually that monthly cost is what, range wise,
for a family or for yourself, I don't know, $100-$200
for a family.
Yeah. So there's another diving deeper into this. There's direct primary care, and then there's concierge medicine, right? And they often get confused, but they're different. A concierge doctor says, hey, I don't like all this insurance junk. I'm seeing too many people. I'm going to see less people, but hey, the people that I'm going to spend more time with them. They have my phone number. But they charge those people extra. They charge them a retainer and they bill insurance. So they double dip. So they say, I'm going to bill your insurance, but you need to pay me extra. And that extra is so I can keep my panel low and actually spend time with you. That's concierge medicine. They're still very much take insurance. Direct primary care is like me, but with primary care, they say, I don't take any insurances, so they don't have all those costs. So it ends up not being that expensive. And actually, employers are moving in the direction, some of them are, of saying, hey, we can't afford these insurance premiums anymore. They're going up by 20% every year. We're going to self-fund, meaning we're going to pay for every health need that our employees have because it's cheaper. And they'll usually use direct primary care doctors because they can take care of about 80% of most anything.
Got it. Yeah, and again, I think people are really, again, if somebody has some pre-existing conditions, that's a whole other story. But for the most part, my wife and I, young, healthy people, we put a lot of time and energy and money to stay that way. And so, I feel like just some basic coverage is all you need, and then you have, I think using a healthcare spending account is the way to go.
Yeah, I agree with you. You have insurance for catastrophic purposes, like you have it for any other insurance that you have, and then you pay cash for the rest of it. And I think that functions pretty well, for most people. If you really don't have any money at all, then maybe something like Medicaid to help the people that really need the help. But for most of us, I just feel like the value that insurance provides is not worth the cost that it is.
Yeah. So you're based in Colorado. Have you run into issues because, of course, every state, Colorado has some health systems that pretty much dominate everything. So have you run into issues when it comes to referrals? What have been some of the hurdles that you've encountered, and how did you solve them?
Gotcha. You're always going to run into hurdles with your own business, but you know what? My hurdles are changeable. I can fix them and get over them, as opposed to these immovable hospital insurance-based systems that you have no hope of changing. So I'm like a ghost, right? I don't have an office. I travel around. I'm only seeing people for cash, essentially, or also personal injury. So I'm not on radar with any of these companies, or I'm not even contracted with insurance companies. I'm not part of any hospitals. So to them, I don't really exist. So, and plus I'm small. I'm not seeing tons of people. I don't have a location, so they don't really notice me. even the other orthopedic groups. I'm not. I'm like. I think they may know about me, but I'm kind of like this just weird anomaly, you know. Um, but so they don't like. We're in different worlds, and I think that's kind of the point. Is that I've created a system through my practice where they're just not important and they're not needed. Um,
Yeah, but when it
and
comes to referrals though, like if like how does the doctor know? Like first of all, where are you finding your patients, and how does another
sure.
doctor know to refer to? Like if it's a patient that wants to pay this, like how are you getting the patients? I guess because that's
Well,
always
one
like the
is
big
from
question.
yeah, no, it's true, and that's one of the hardest parts. So one is I've got pretty good search engine optimization, so I get people that like look for a steroid injection, and they'll find me organically. Two is referrals from other providers who are also in the world of cash. So what does that mean? It means direct primary care doctors. Honestly, I get a lot of referrals from chiropractors. They're in the same world, you know. Chiropractors, it sounds like a curse, but it's really a blessing that insurance doesn't like to cover chiropractic care. And so they've been forced into these cash-based models, and they're seeing all musculoskeletal stuff. So a lot of times I'll go to chiropractors' offices where they're manipulating someone's spine, but hey, they got shoulder pain. Well, I can take care of that. And then I see the patient at the chiropractor's office, and that's value added. So that's most of my referrals. So find me on the internet, and then various providers who are, you know, in the cash world. And then over time, I figured out like, okay, what type of doctor really is good at giving referrals and what's not. But I'm not going to primary care doctors' offices regular. I stay out of system stuff. Those guys don't have time to go to the bathroom or eat lunch. They're not going to have the time to explain what I do and if it's a good fit or not.
Right.
So that's mostly where they come from.
Do you feel that, you know, in a lot of models that are like for surgeons, the focus is primarily on procedural. That's like the bread and butter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like for your model, focusing on the things that are easier to get cash-based, like let's say injections, for example, and those are the ways that you're able to get patients in, you're able to, you know, build up a business around that, and then that kind of sustains you as like these larger procedures come up, because then you're not like operating. Like how often are you operating these days?
Not that often. I mean, it's becoming more regular, but like, I'll go weeks for sure, or even a month or two sometimes between cases. And that's why I got to be careful what I do, and I have to make sure I do cadaver labs. And the cases I've done, you know, they turn out pretty well. But that's because I'm not doing anything crazy, you know. So yeah, I agree with that. So it's hard. This is going to sound really crazy. It's hard to make surgery profitable, especially in the world of cash. And I think as time goes on, that'll leak over to insurance, because you just need so much stuff, so many things. I mean, like a guy called me about a tendon injury last week, and it's like, well, I need to get these sutures. These sutures come in a pack of 12 as $400. Well, that's more than he wants to pay. You know, that's just for me to get the sutures, not actually to do it. But, you know, in a surgery center, it's like you need so much equipment. I mean, you need lots of staff. You need a preoperative nurse, you know, a circulator, a postoperative nurse. You need anesthesia. You need a scrub tech. You need all sorts of sterilization. The capital expenses are high. So it's hard to make that super profitable. So for me, a small minority of the profit I make comes from that. And most of it comes from patient visits and value-added things that I do. I think in the future of surgery, because look, these insurance cuts, these Medicare cuts are going to keep coming every year. Orthopedic surgeons lament another 8% cut on Medicare, you know, which translates to more because insurance companies pay like 120 of Medicare or 200 of Medicare or whatever. That's going to keep happening. And I think in the future, it's going to be difficult to make a surgical practice really profitable. I mean, like take joints, for example. You need more stuff for joints than you do for anything else. And right now, surgeon gets paid about $1,400. That's just going to keep getting ticked down until it's like barely profitable. And I think that's where it's going to go. So no, surgery is not, I still do it, but it's not, you know, I do it because it's the right thing to do and I like doing it, but it's not where majority of my profits come from. They come from just regular patient visits.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I mean, you know, in the last every year, like the costs go up, inflation's, you know, always been there, but what's paid out on these procedures keeps going down, and there's going to be a point where it gets down so low that surgeons are going to be like, nope, don't want to do it. I mean, how do we fix this? Because like the number of people requiring these surgeries isn't going to go down or go away. So like, I mean, it's really complicated, but like how is this going to fix itself? Can it?
Yeah. Well, so with me, if I'm trying to book a case and like I get a certain quote on a price and it's too much, like the patient just won't do it, and that's kind of the end. It's a tough space to live in. But I think as far as the other surgeons, they're just going to keep operating because that's all they know how to do. So if Joyce went from paying $1,400 per joint to, let's say, $500 just overnight, guess what? They're going to keep doing it. They're just going to try to do more. And I think that is what you'll see is like these surgeons just booking themselves out to insane.
And this is the problem, right? Like we talked about this earlier, like that's the big problem is that these changes happen, and then instead of trying to figure out how do we either change the system or just bring a new system to market altogether, surgeons, like their natural tendency is just like, I'm just going to work more and harder. And then you see burnout going up. Physician suicide is like 3 times higher than the general population.
It's terrible. It's really bad.
It's really bad.
Well, in training, you're not taught to work smarter. You're taught to work harder. And then if that doesn't work, just keep working harder than that. And so, like, that's the only recourse these guys have. If all you do is joint replacements and joints get slashed, like, what are you going to do? Like, you're just going to do more. But maybe you're already at the maximum. And you're seeing this a lot. I like joints because it's very, like, it's very, like, visible. And there's a lot of people getting joints. And the reimbursements are very well defined, right? And what you've seen is joint surgeons become extremely efficient, where now they're doing outpatient joints, no physical therapy, non-opioid, opioid sparing. Like, they're reaching the maximum of their efficiency, but to make up for this, like, loss of, income that's coming in. But, like, where can they go? How many can one person do? I mean, they're reaching the edges of these efficiencies. Where are they going to do them next? In their car? Like, no. It's like they're reaching the wall on these things. And if, like I said, if you're just based purely on insurance reimbursements, which 99.9% of them are, like, you're stuck. You're just stuck unless you find a way to get out. And that's basically what I do and help other people do if they ask me to do it.
What do you think about, one thing I did notice, and I mean, I feel like it's a good thing, but I'm still not sure about it, because on one side you have large health systems and hospitals just buying out practices left and right. But then in the world of orthopedics, there's been a lot of private equity activity just the last few years, like private equity coming in, infusing capital into a practice, and it's just like, hey, just keep doing your thing and make more money. Like, we'll leave you alone. Do you feel like private equity can help with this, at least in the world of orthopedics? I mean, do you have any thoughts on it?
I think it's pick your poison. They're essentially the same. I mean, the hospital at least pretends to care about patient health and well-being. Private equity could not care less. They're looking to make money, and that is it. And not over a short period of time. So, like, if you get private equity in your practice, chances are they're going to blow it up in 5 years and sell it to the hospital anyways. I mean, that's their goal.
That's a good point.
So
yeah, that's a very good point.
I don't think infusion of money can, like, help in that regard. I mean, it can help anything, but not for what the physician is trying to do. I mean, it's just a losing game. I mean, the problem is it's a game where the physicians do not set the rules, and you have to play it, and it gets harder and harder to play. So I've decided, as well as other people, to just not play that game and create a game with my own rules, and I can be successful. And I feel like do a better job for my patients outside the system.
Yeah, and I wonder, I mean, because you can argue on one side, like a surgeon will say, like, yeah, I can do it that way, but I'm going to probably, like, make less money and everything. That's true, but at the same time, you have a lot more control over your time, and I would imagine you have a little bit more of it. And so then that also opens up opportunities to bring in other income streams. So you mentioned, like, you started to do consulting more, but then there's other things that people can do. I mean, one thing I've been really inspired by is if you look at some of the, like, really interesting physician entrepreneurs, like Peter. Do you know Peter Attia?
I do not.
So Peter Attia, he was a super interesting guy. He's been on Joe Rogan's podcast quite a lot. He surgical oncologist out of Hopkins, so, like, really well trained. Then stopped practicing medicine, went and worked for, like, McKinsey and private equity, and then came back into medicine because he got more interested in longevity. So he's practicing. He has a clinic that's focused on longevity, but then he has so many other income streams when it comes to, he has a paid podcast. He has certain things he invests in. So I wonder if that's the way it's. I feel like it might be similar to now, like post pandemic, a lot of people are working from home, and so people are setting up their own small business, but then setting up a variety of different income streams that by themselves are not enough, but then in some, like you can be doing better, if not even more than like had you just gone and been straight employed.
Yeah, I think there's two facets to that are worth noting. One is the first is that with a cash-based practice, like you're going to feel when you start it like you're retired, and that's not a bad thing. So you just work significantly less, but you still make good money for the amount of time you're working. And so, what's your time worth? If I want to make time to go to the zoo on a Wednesday with my daughters, I can go. It's just not a big deal. So I think it's another way of kind of looking at time. I mean, that's something that if you're working so much that your relationship with your spouse breaks down, and you go and get to see your kids, like what's the point of all that money anyways?
I agree. I don't think I completely agree. And I was talking to another surgeon about this the other day, which is like, you spend all this time working more and more hours to make more money. So when you get more money, you buy a bigger house, you're tied to all these things. And then, it becomes a cycle. And then like later on in life, you spend all this money to make up for that time. You can't. Like your kids are only kids for so long, right?
Right. You can't put a price on that. And but even with the cash practice, if you get really rolling, you'll be making just as much money as you were before. And just know that you're going to be poor for a while, or you're not going to make money with any business that you start. This is no different. It just takes a while, and it depends how you want to do it. I don't pay for advertising. I rely on word of mouth. It's the cheapest and works the best. But guess what? It takes a while. But I think they kind of look at it wrong. A lot of physicians golden handcuff themselves, and that's just a mistake I see over and over again.
Do you feel like that's a result though of like some people come out of residency with just massive student loans? I mean, going to Harvard or Hopkins or you go to a medical school out of state and you're paying like what 20, 30, 40 grand a year. Do you feel like a lot of that's just the pressure of paying off those loans, and it's like after being paid less than a teacher for like 5, 6, 7 years, it's like finally I get a good salary? Do you think that's part of it?
I think there's a lot of delayed gratification. So when they get it, I mean, what the smart thing to do would be to live like a resident for a little while longer and just pay down your loans and those sorts of things.
Oh yeah, but they don't do that. They ball out, man. They're like rappers. I feel like some surgeons are like rappers, man. They're just like cars,
athletes,
money. Yeah, I know, and it's just it's so
really
true.
And it's really with anybody who wasn't used to making money and now gets a lot of money, right? Like they're not. They don't know what they're doing with it, and they don't really know how much is coming in or going out. So they buy the nice house, buy the car.
There's no personal finance course that they teach you in residency. Like, hey man, here's how you manage your finances so you don't screw your life up.
Yeah, all you need is like just one. It was just one. I mean, I've seen a guy making close to 7 figures take out a loan to pay his taxes. I mean, I'm sorry,
that's insane. No, but it's funny is that I know 2 people who did that last year, physicians. They called me about it, and I was like, are you kidding me? Why?
So it's just gross negligence when it comes to finances, and it's like this unwilling to take business risks, but taking these terrible financial and social risks. Like we see it all the time. It's almost comical, but it's really just more sad.
Yeah, and
I want to get back to answer your question though about other streams of revenue. So yeah, like I do consulting and other sorts of things. I think it opens you up to that because you have time to do that, and it also provides some sort of stability. So if you're working for a practice at a hospital and you get laid off, or any job, you go from 100% revenue of income to 0 overnight,
That's right.
Same day. And like that's a risk that I think a lot of entrepreneurs don't like, but that most people feel totally fine with for whatever reason. It's like the bubble's fine until it pops, and then you got nothing, and then you're scrambling. Do you have to move? Do you have to go somewhere else to find a job? But if you can diversify with other streams of revenue, then maybe one goes down, but you still have 4 others. You're all right. So paradoxically, these cash-based practices are a lot more stable than the other practices that are out there with the mergers and acquisitions and like just the conglomerations. It's crazy to think about it like that. But, if I fail, it's going to be by my own hand. It's not going to be because United Healthcare decides that, I'm not, doing well, or a hospital decides they don't like me anymore.
Yeah, and it's really unfortunate too. And I think again, like the theme of everything we're talking about right now is just that, unfortunately, because of the lack of education and just because of culturally that's how it's been, physicians just have, abdicated responsibility to learn about these things and think them through. And the solution keeps going back to what physicians are trained on from day one in medical school, which is like, just work harder. You know, like, that's it. Like when I'll never forget, like when I was in medical school, like I had, you know, we were in a new school. And so the first year, a lot of the unit exams, they were new, like, you know, so they weren't like foolproof. And like me and a few other students failed one of our unit exams. And the solution was like, well, you guys just need to study harder. I'm like, that doesn't make sense. What do you mean study harder? Like, we're studying all the freaking time. Like, it's, you know, like I hate this concept of like, you know, just do more of the same. It's like, it's, you know, it just doesn't make any sense. But I feel like physicians have just gotten away with that historically. It's just like, yeah, just, you know, this is just part of the game. Just going to work more, work harder. Like, hey, it's okay. I got my pay cut, you know?
If you try to work smarter, the system severely punishes you for it. Severely. So I got in trouble a lot as an intern, which is the first year of your residency.
Oh, how the hell have we gone like almost an hour in and we have not talked about these kind of stories? Let's hear some of that. What kind of things do you get in trouble for?
So it wasn't really medical related. It was because of like the system issues that I saw that I would make known. And they basically, when you make waves like that,
by the way, can you come forward? Just sorry to interrupt. Can you come forward just a little bit? You got that. You got kind of like a light tattoo going down your face from the window. Okay, that works.
Got better. Okay, yeah. Gosh, like the things you get in trouble for. Oh man. So like there was one time where this is probably when I got in the most trouble, where we had a
wait
PA
for context. What year were you?
As an intern, this is 2013.
Oh, this is your intern year. So you just started.
Yeah. I'm the beginning. Yeah. Well, you make these mistakes as an intern because they beat the crap out of you, and then you don't make it again.
Okay.
So, and like, I'll give you an example of that too. So I have this job where I'm running around like a maniac. I'm doing all the floor consults. I'm in clinic. You know, I'm getting ER consults, and I'm just like obscenely busy. And we had this PA orthopedic PA, who was being paid probably twice, 2.5 times what I'm getting paid. And she left the clinic to go see somebody on the floor, right? So 2 things happened at the same time. One was a patient got transferred directly to the floor who needed surgery that day. Another was a guy who was creating a ruckus and like swearing at all the nurses. Nurses were like, we need to discharge him. So she basically agreed to do that while I took care of this other guy. And she left clinic to go do so. And when I went up to go take care of this guy, as I'm working on it, the nurses are like all up on me because like, you need to discharge this guy. Like, he's creating a problem. I'm like, okay, but I got to take care of this. I'm triaging, right? There's only one of me. And I'm like, the PA said she would do it. And then like they called up and they're like, oh, the PA called me. She said, you're going to do it. And like, I just lost it. And I was just like, no, she said she would do it and she makes more money than me. And that like all hell broke loose. You know what I mean? Because I said that, basically like, you know, pointing out like a system error of like, hey, this person's getting paid 2.5 times what I'm paying. I'm worked into the bone and they're putting more work on me. Like, how is that right? And that just created all sorts of problems. So, you know, it creates meetings. You go to these meetings, you know, and then you're like, it's just so stressful. You just can't do that anymore. So you stop making waves. You become like, you mold into the system. Like if something's inconvenient, like you have no leverage. You have zero leverage. Like they can like ruin your career if they just let you go. Like, it's not like you can get another job.
And that happened to a friend of mine. Yeah, that happened to a friend of mine. He was I want to say he was a surgeon. I think he was a spine surgeon actually. But yeah, some issue had came up and like he just got kicked out. And like where do you go from there? Because it's like getting like a scarlet. Yeah, you got a scarlet letter. You're literally done. And what's sad is like, you know, even 10 years ago, like physicians had a lot more independence, and so you know they would fight back. But these days, like with our generation and the generation below that's getting into residency, like I talk to people and I can just like hear it in their voice that they are just like being beaten into submission. It's like the same thing when I hear like people like I'm a startup guy. So some of my friends who are at a company and they get acquired by a large company like Medtronic or J&J, no offense to those guys, but like it is what it is. But I hear it in my friend's voice, like you just get like if you're a nail that's sticking out a little too far, you just get hammered back in.
That's a good way to put it. So I'll give you another example. So So this is my second year. I'm not getting in trouble anymore, right? I made it past intern year. I figured it out, what I have to do to survive. I'm like going to move a patient. This patient had a knee replacement and then got intubated. They're in the ICU and they're slid down in their bed and their ankle is all smashed up like at the bottom of the bed. And I go to a nurse. I'm like, hey, can you help me move this patient? And these are real stories, by the way. So I go to move it, like ready, like 1, 2, 3, move. And then I guess he's not moving as much. And she's like, are you even pulling? Do you even have any muscles? Like she's all saying this to me, right? And it's just, I'm just trying to like let it go. And after that, she's like, we move the patient. She's just been so mean to me, right? I'd never met this person before. And like, like the last
This is the first time you worked with her. First time you worked with her.
I've never seen her before or after. So
and in front of other people, she's just talking smack.
Well, we were in the room, just in front of the patient. Yeah, just like being real mean, just real mean.
Oh, and the patient's awake.
So the patient's intubated. It's just me and her.
Oh, intubated. Okay.
And then she's like, okay, we need to tie his restraints in. I'm like, okay. She's like, wait, do you know how to tie a knot? Like, I'm a surgeon. I'm like, of course I know how to tie a knot. I'm like, yes. And then she's like, no. She's like, no, just let me get it. Just let me get it. And it was just like abuse, right? Like I just walked into abuse. And I'm a second year orthopedic surgery resident. So I get up, I leave the room, and I'm like, whatever. That's all I say is whatever. And I could just like feel her getting angry behind me. And like, I just knew it wasn't going to be something good. So what I did is I took my ID badge and I tucked it in my like scrub top. So she couldn't get my name and I never got written up. But like, that's the stuff you start doing. And like, I got away with, I don't even know what I got away with. Like saying the word whatever. But, you're definitely afraid of getting rid up and getting in trouble. And, like, you carry that with you. And it kills your creativity. And it kills your ability to take risk. I mean, I had times where I had to double, like, hand copy a consent form. And when I complained about it, like, how dare you say that about those consent forms? Like, you need to apologize to these consent forms. And, like, you're so beaten into submission that you're willing to accept, like, essentially anything. You're taking a spirited, independent person and you're just destroying them in that way. So when these guys come out, they can't take any risk. Their creativity is crushed because they're working in a system that doesn't that doesn't reward that. In fact, it punishes that. So when I quit my fellowship and everything, like all that kind of came rushing back, and that's what's allowed me to be successful. The same type of person that got me in trouble. When again, these aren't medical mistakes, right? It's not like I'm killing people here or hurting them. The same stuff that got me in trouble so long ago.
Yeah, what's funny is that a lot of medicine is similar to, it's like school is actually designed during the industrial age and industrial revolution, because like when Henry Ford came out with the factory, it's like, well, how do we train the average person to be really compliant and do tasks and shut up and sit down and everything? It's like, oh, school, perfect. That's why you have to sit down, nice rows and everything. And I feel like in medical training, it's very much like that too. Like it's like going to the military, except worse sometimes. Because like you're just, at least in the military, there's like rank. When you're a resident, like everybody's just gonna shit on you,
Yeah, I mean,
and it's okay.
As you rise, yeah. That's just what it is.
And what's funny is that I saw this is the first time like I was just starting to get into things like technology adoption, psychology, and everything when I was in med school, and again, this is a new curriculum. And what was funny is that there was a lot of things that just didn't make sense. Like, it was a great curriculum, by the way. Like, I went to Paull Foster School of Medicine, which is out of Texas Tech. Great curriculum. But there were some things there's things there that didn't make sense, and they didn't change them. And a lot of times I feel like in medicine, it's kind of like the people who are going through it at the time, they're like, this is terrible. Nobody should do it this way and everything. But the moment that they're done, they're like, okay, everybody else has to go through this the way we did because we went through it. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, there's a lot of that mentality. I would try not to do that as a resident. There's two ways to look at that. This happened to me, so it's okay for it to happen to you, which I dislike, or hey, this thing happened to me. This was a bad thing. I don't want this to happen to anyone else, right? It's like saying, oh, my arm got cut off, so your arm can get cut off too. Like, it doesn't make any sense, like, logically, but there's a lot of that in there. I always try to make things better for the people that came behind me, if possible, and not subject people to the same crap that I was subjected to, if it was just nonsensical,
Have you like anybody that you trained with, like with you, above you or below you? Have you stayed in touch? Is anybody? Do you see anybody kind of jumping the ship and saying like, yeah, I wanna try this sort of cash based mobile or mobile orthopedic care model?
And Not other orthopedic surgeons. I've had other friends in med school who are like really thinking about it, but not orthopedic surgeons. And I think that's because they still get paid well, and we haven't hit that same pain point. We will, trust me on that. But it's a pain point thing. So primary care doctors hit that a long time ago. So they've already figured out direct primary care. I mean, there's models. There's a lot of people doing it. These doctors are happy. They're good doctors. You're allowing them to practice how they want. And they do a really good job. So they've already figured it out. I think it's possible for any specialty, mostly, except maybe like neonatology or something that's like really necessarily in system. But, it's a spectrum of difficulty. At one end would be those specialties that are very difficult. And the other end is like psychiatry. But, man, all you need is a phone.
Yeah, no, good. Seriously, like digital, I'll tell you, like billions of dollars went into digital mental health last year for a damn good reason. And I mean, like for me, like I needed to see a psychiatrist recently just because for medication reasons. And, I did it via Zoom and I was like, oh my God, why don't we do this more often? Like, why the hell do I don't want to come in and see you. This is it is fantastic.
Yes, especially no physical exam is needed in psychiatry, like almost
no.
Never. So it's very... Yeah, if you're a psychiatrist, the world is really your oyster at this point in time. If you want to like leave the system, other things are more difficult, and I'm trying to pioneer it for orthopedics the best I can.
When I was going to ask you like something. I don't know why I forgot to ask you about this, but like the times that you do have to take somebody in for surgery, where do you go to an ASC? Do you go to a hospital? Do how does all that work? Like in a nutshell,
I go to an ASC. And like again, it's just making sure that it's a case that everybody there feels comfortable with. And obviously cases that need hospitals, I can't do them, so I don't do them. And also cash based, the trauma you get tends to be older. You just really have to be careful with what you do. But generally, it's just an ASC, and they'll pay a bundled price, and I'll distribute the money, and I have to work with the ASC there to make sure that it works for everybody, and that's pretty much it.
Nice. Well, look, I want to be mindful of your time again. Like, I'm really inspired by what you do, and I know hopefully we're going to leave in the show notes like your website, your LinkedIn handle, and everything, so people can follow you and really amplify your voice. But before we go, got to do the favorite part of the show that everybody loves, which is these quick kind of rapid fire questions. We're going to do 2 or 3 of them real quick. You can take as long as you want to answer them, or as quickly as you want. Okay. So you ready?
Yeah, let's do it. I'll do my best here.
Okay. So question number 1 is that, during the pandemic, we all bought a bunch of ridiculous stuff, and it was good. Books, technology products. What was the most interesting thing you bought for yourself that was under $100 that you're like, man, that was a good buy?
Under $100. What did I buy myself that was super useful? Gosh. I gotta think for a minute here. Well, I have something that's over $100, like $4.
That's okay. We'll take that.
Can I use that?
Yeah.
So I got a Roomba. I got a Roomba and like that.
Oh, how do you like game changer? I've been thinking about doing it.
Yeah, you got to get like a mid-level Roomba, like like you don't need a top of the line one, but if you get too low level, like I don't think it does a great job. But this one's got a whole base where it like cleans itself, and I've got kids, and so I put it on the main floor where that's where everybody comes in and out of the house. That's where everybody eats. So run it 3 times a week, and it's pretty awesome. It really cleans up pretty good.
I think I'm gonna do it because I've been wanting to get a robot for such a. It's weird. I'm a guy who built my career in robotics, but I don't own a robot. And I was like, should I do it? But every time I look at them, I'm like, I think I might need to get the $700-800 one. And I'm like, I'm not spending that on a robot.
Get mid-range. Yeah, it's
mid-range.
Like all I wanted was just a robot to clean my house while I slept. Like, is that too much to ask?
Yeah, that's what. Done. Good recommendation. Okay. Next question. So, part of medicine is, this culture of continuing education. You yourself being an entrepreneur, you're always having to educate yourself as well. What's been a really interesting book or let's say podcast that you've been really, really into lately that you've been recommending a lot to people?
I've been reading a couple of Malcolm Gladwell books lately. Like I read Outliers and I just finished David and Goliath. Those are really solid books. That I think are super applicable for like kind of what I'm doing or trying to do. But his stuff is excellent.
Fantastic. All right. So last question for you is that, for the next year, let's say that there's a billboard that's taken out that goes in front of every hospital, ASC, et cetera, and every orthopedic surgeon is going to see this billboard as they go into work. for one whole year, what message did you put on that billboard?
What you think matter doesn't matter. What you think matters doesn't matter.
Very, very well put. Very well put. Awesome. I love it. Dr. Paull, thank you so much for joining us. Stay on for a few seconds. Thank you, everyone, for listening to this. Omar, I'm Khateeb, your host and head of state, mixing my words there, for the state of MedTech. We'll see you next time. Check out the links below in the show notes and give Dr. Paull a follow. We'll see you all next time. Thank you for listening to another episode of The State of MedTech. I'm your host, Omar M. Khateeb. Do us a favor, if you like this episode, share with somebody, and go ahead on Apple and Spotify, wherever you are, leave a 5-star review, type a few nice notes about us. This is how we get other people to find the show. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.